On today's episode, the New York Knicks look like a completely different basketball team under Mike Brown. We're going to nerd out about it, tell you all the adjustments that are making this team a legitimate championship contender next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are locked on to the New York Knicks. My name is Gavin Schall. I am a New York City native, a credentialed media member that's been covering the Knicks for nearly a decade, and the Saturday co-host of the Locked On NBA podcast. My newest co-host here on Locked On Knicks. Man, I'm excited to introduce him. He is XJ. He is the co-host of the Hot Hand Theory podcast. If you've been listening over the last year or so, he has been on a ton. You could tell I have a ton of fun when he's on the show, and I'm incredibly excited to be doing this with him and Chris going forward. But first, I want to tell you that this is Locked On Knicks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. You do the podcast on the New York Knicks, giving the most detailed insight on your favorite team 5 days a week. So be sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform for the best insight on your favorite team every single day. And today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. If your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. On today's show, XJ and I are going to be diving deep on Mike Brown's new offense. I know I've talked a lot over the last few episodes about the stuff that excites me. I'm really curious, as a fellow quote-unquote Tom Thibodeau hater, what excites XJ about this new offense. We're also going to talk about the defense because there are some shifts there as well. But before we get into it, buddy, first of all, welcome. And I wanted to give you a chance just to introduce yourself to everyone. I know the vast majority of people listening have seen you on the show a bunch over the last year, but for whatever people have missed you, what's kind of your background in all this? And that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, Gavin, man, I'm so excited to be doing this, to be a co-host on Locked On Knicks. I'll talk a little bit about myself, obviously, but first I want to say I've listened to Locked On Knicks really since like the 2022 season. And in my book, you, Gavin, and Alex are legends in this Knicks content creation space. So I'm super honored to be here. And as far as my background, I've worked as a contributor on Knicks Film School, doing on-air work with them for a couple of years, and then, branched out to co-found my own podcast with my co-founder Jeff called Hot Hand Theory, where we talk about the whole entire NBA, not just Knicks, and break things down from an analytical perspective. But I'm really excited to be joining Locked On Knicks right now. I mean, I feel like we're putting together a really like an all-star squad here with Chris joining, and at one of the most exciting times for the Knicks franchise. And we're going to be here every day dropping super unique insights that you won't get anywhere else. Insider information you won't get anywhere else, with fun personalities. So I'm really super ecstatic about being here with you, Gavin, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So if anybody is listening right now and hasn't subscribed, or, subscribe up, because it's going to be a blast all season. So yeah, super excited.
Yeah, I'm incredibly excited. And to your point on the timing, I meant to mention this before we started recording, but if Tom Thibodeau had still been the coach, I think it could have gotten really dark with you and me on here. Because people were getting you like once a week, just like ruthlessly dismantling like a lot of what Tibbs was doing. And to be fair, giving proper context and giving a lot of the credit that was due. And there was an immense amount of credit to Tom Thibodeau, rebuilt the Knicks. Shout out to Tom Thibodeau. But man, I think this could have gone to a dark place if he had still been the coach and you were doing this a couple times a week. So I'm happy just from that perspective that you have something new to talk about. And man, I've been talking a lot in the first 5 minutes of this, so I'm just going to throw it to you. 2 preseason games in, what's excited you about the Mike Brown era so far?
Oh man, I have a lot to say, obviously, and I've heard a lot of what you had to say. I love everything you've had to say. I want to try to kind of contextualize some of what we're seeing and what's so exciting about it with something like a little abstract, but a concept I've been thinking a lot about. So through 2 preseason games, obviously, we're seeing some super, super encouraging stuff. To me, offensively, it specifically all boils down to the speed of the offense. But this is something we're hearing kind of from everywhere. It's like the pace, why is the pace so exciting? But to me, it's not just the pace. It's not just pushing in transition. All of that matters and is really significant, but there's a concept to me for why playing faster is better in nearly all cases, in my opinion, even, when you don't consistently get transition looks or play the fastest, like statistical pace in the league. And so that's really what I want to break down, because there's pace, there's transition, there's all of that stuff. There's speed on offense, there's ball movement, all this stuff that we're seeing from Brown. But there's this like hidden layer of offensive effectiveness that doesn't show up on the box score. It doesn't show up even in advanced metrics that we all know I love so much. It's really not something that we can measure. I think connected with all those things, the pace and all of that stuff, is a concept that I like to call on offense. I like to call it a probe. And what a probe is basically any meaningful offensive attempt to create a scoring chance. And the best example of this, Knicks fans won't like to hear this, is the Pacers last season.
Yeah.
They are amazing at this. They've been doing this for a while. You'll see, Halliburton pushes the ball up the court really quickly. They'll run a quick pick and roll, some kind of action with pressure going towards the rim. And if there's nothing there, he might just get the ball back and reset, try again, do something else. Maybe it flows into a different kind of action. Maybe the ball goes out to Miles Turner and it resets to a dribble handoff, something else. But the point is, every time you test the defense or probe the defense to get a chance at a potentially high quality look, the more you do this within a possession, the better chance you have to get a really good shot. And that's something that we didn't see very much under Tom Thibodeau. We saw, Brunson walk the ball up the court, dribble the clock out, and then try to look for an attack. But that's only one probe, and that's only going to get you. Sometimes you'll get a really high quality look because you got a superstar level guy and initiator in Jalen Brunson. But when you're trying to probe 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times in a possession, guess what? One of those 4 times, you're going to get a high quality look. And that's what we're seeing from Mike Brown with the pace. That's why the pace matters. It's not just number of possessions per game. It's about how many times you're pushing the defense to look for high quality looks within the course of a single possession. And that's how you get elite offenses consistently, even in playoff dynamics. And that's what we're seeing from the Knicks. And that's why everybody should be so excited about what we're seeing from Mike Brown and the Knicks right now.
I think it's an incredible point. And I remember just having nightmares about, like, against the Pacers, the Knicks would execute 2, 3, 4 times. And then the 5th time, the dam would break. And that was especially true when Karl-Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson were on the floor and they were both involved in the actions. And you just looked at what the Knicks had on the other end. And I think this was the point that you and Jeff were so good about pushing and making all of last year. Like, player for player, the Knicks, like, maybe short of Boston, like, had offensive talent equivalent to any team in the NBA and didn't have proportionate results because they weren't maximizing it with that same aggressive approach. And like, you were not putting proportionate stress on the defense to what the offensive talent level was, because not everything was moving in the same direction. And it's this idea, and it's one I've sort of tangled with all offseason, where, like, I internally have reservations about this Knicks team winning a championship based on what we saw last year. And I was like, the biggest thing is that, like you know the phrase, like, more than the sum of their parts. Like, the Knicks were so rarely even equal to the sum of their parts because you were not, like, leveraging Cat's off-ball spacing, or the fact that Mikal and OG are as good of corner 3-point shooters as there are in the NBA, or like Josh Hart's playmaking and rebounding, which is something just because he's only played like 7 not eventful minutes in the preseason. We haven't even seen that element and like what he could bring and how he could fit into what Mike Brown does. And I think that'll be like really exciting and a really good fit. And to your point, like I was thinking of one specific play when you were talking, and that was Jalen Brunson had this possession. I think it was in the second quarter of the second game against the Sixers, where he drove, he gets stopped. And last year, that is just end of possession. Give the ball to Cat, give the ball to Josh. They have to create like a shot out of nowhere. And to those guys' credit, they were pretty good at that last year. But this time, instead of panicking or forcing something up, he throws it back to Deuce at the top of the key, comes up and sets an off-ball screen. And this is like very like Steph Curry-esque, right? And like Jalen is obviously small, but he's stocky and he has a lot of gravity. So like it will trip up a defense when he's used as an off-ball screener, because his defender like can't easily switch. You don't want to leave him. You don't want to set up a mismatch and just let him get the ball back and attack an opposing wing that's not necessarily prepared to guard him, because that's the guy who's guarding OG Anunoby. So both defenders sort of stick with him, or at the very least are slow to get around the screen. OG gets around the screen. OG takes 2 dribbles, slips it to Mitchell Robinson. Mitch, I can't remember if he got a dunk or got fouled, but the point is, like, you got a great result off of what under Tom Thibodeau very likely would have been a dead possession. And not only are you leveraging like Brunson's gravity, you're also giving OG like something he craves and something that he showed when Brunson was out to be pretty good at, an opportunity to be a playmaker, and OG like in space with like a head start coming off Brunson's screen, I think is more than capable of doing that. And that's exactly like he threw a little head fake, baited the big, slipped it to Mitch. And like that's going to be an even easier read for Mikal Bridges. That's an easy read for Josh Hart, who's just a fantastic passer. And Josh will even be able to like spray it to the corners as well. And that is like a really, really, really exciting element of this offense. I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that. I also want to talk a little bit about Mikal Bridges because I think there's a secondary effect to this pace that does not maybe inherently get captured in the stats, but I want to talk about. We'll get into it in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks. But first, I want to tell you about our good friends over at Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. I love how the Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights, and corrects your form as you go, making every rep safer and just that much smarter. The swivel screen is a game changer. You can go from running on the Tread Plus to strength training, all without missing a beat. And the personalized class recommendations keep you engaged. You get workouts tailored to your vibe and energy level each week. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. All right, what's up, guys? Gavin Schall, XJ, back here on Locked On Knicks. I'll throw it right over to you. Like, did you see like any specific examples in the game of pace having that effect, or just sort of the flow and the weaponization of every guy on the floor? And like, I just like, I guess the cleanest way for me to sum it up is like leveraging what everyone does best simultaneously, even if that's off the ball.
Yeah, I do want to just really hit on that because I think you talked about so many really great points. And something that I think is not acknowledged enough is how multi-skilled and multi-talented the Knicks players are, especially all of their starters. When we talk about OG Anunoby, when we talk about Mikal Bridges, these are guys who have a ton of a variety of skills. And maybe we see these guys as like, I think a lot of NBA fans look at things as like a binary where it's like, well, he's an offensive initiator and he's not, and he's a role player and he does this. These guys have a lot of skills. They can dribble, shoot, and pass. They can create for others. They can create for themselves. They can read and react and make good decisions. And the fact that you have at any given time 4 guys on the court who can do that, and then a guy like Mitchell Robinson who can finish anything and it's just a force at the rim, I think that using that speed, using that sense of where everything's flow, one action flows into the next, something doesn't work, there's another thing to go to right after, that really exacerbates and enhances those guys' variety of skills. And so that's something that I really love about Mike Brown's offense. And in some of the examples you were talking about, it's like, okay, OG's in the situation where he has a slight advantage and he's able to capitalize on it either with a pass, either with a mid-range shot. There's always an advantage and they're always trying to figure out the best way to capitalize on that advantage. And something that I like about what they do when they've been pushing is having guys kind of leak out and seal early. And again, that's something those wings are really, really capable of. And you and I actually, Gavin, have talked about this before.
Yeah.
My favorite game from the Knicks, and I'll say half a game from the Knicks last season during the regular season, was the Knicks versus the Oklahoma City Thunder, their first game of the 2 that they played against them in the first half. That was like perfect basketball if I've ever seen it. And one of the things that they did so well was that they had Bridges and OG sprint out, get early seals, and in transition or semi-transition, those guys got easy shots at the rim against smaller Oklahoma City Thunder guards and defenders who are elite defenders, but maybe not in a position where they're literally under the rim against a guy who's 2 to 3 inches taller than them and can finish really well. And so the Knicks are kind of taking advantage of things like that a lot more consistently. And the more we see that, the more we see them take advantage of the skill sets of these guys who are multi-talented, not just one-dimensional spot-up shooters, the more we'll see everybody kind of play to their potential. And what you mentioned and talked about being bigger and greater than the sum of their parts. And that's the way that we're going to see it.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, you're paying now OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges a combined $400 million to not just sit in the corner, right? And they're very good at
Yep.
that. They can do that. They'll sit there and they'll hit 40% of those shots credibly, but they can do a whole lot more. And Mikal is like, I opened last episode talking about it, so I will leave it mostly to you. But I think maybe more than anyone else on this team, like, and this makes my heart sing, right? Because you gave up. I don't know if I've ever said that phrase in my life, but that is how enthusiastic I feel about Mikal Bridges right now. Like, it is like the cartoon, like hearts beating out of the eyes, because like in my head, like the two things that we're going to hold, and they work in conjunction. The Knicks back from winning a title is like, can you survive, like really survive against the best teams in the NBA? Brunson and Cat on the floor together for 36 minutes. And as a baseline, this team, and that's maybe still the biggest lingering question, this team has to find an answer to that. And to the point of that question, you need 100, not even like the best version of Mikal Bridges we've seen. You need a version of Mikal Bridges, maybe 10%, 20% better than we've ever seen from him before, offensively and even more so defensively, to make those lineups tenable. And the reason the Knicks gave up 5 first-round picks for Mikal, like, is partially, like, so you got the sweetheart deal from Jalen Brunson, but it's also because, like, he was supposed to be this perfect plug-and-play guy who was infinitely malleable, who could fit into any lineup, any configuration, and in conjunction with OG Anunoby, right, insulate those two defensively better than, like, essentially any non-Thunder two-man defensive combo in the NBA, right? And make it so, like, it's not only tenable to play those two, you can actually have a good defense with those two on the floor. And the biggest thing to that, like with Mikal, like at times it's like it's effort, but it's also like you needed energy and enthusiasm. And so much of last year was just him like slogging through games. And that was partially because he played the most minutes in the league. He obviously didn't miss a game. He ran the most miles of anyone in the NBA. And his cardio, which is absolutely elite, I think was just misused in him jogging back and up and down the court and unsuccessfully fighting through, I don't know what, 30 screens, 40 screens a game. And it feels like under Mike Brown, that energy is being directed in a different way because he's being empowered as a ball handler, because he's being empowered defensively. Like you're seeing him like that it goes to, like, I'm sure you remember this. Our buddy Benji Ritholtz wrote this like great article about, or maybe it was a Twitter thread about Julius Randle, right? And his inertia and how like he was so much better once you got him in motion, and you can just feel it from Mikal Bridges. Like he crashed from behind the 3-point line to get a defensive rebound and then push the ball the length of the court. Ultimately didn't finish the play, was trying to get it to Gershon Yabusele, was open. He threw it away. But that's not the point. The point is like just everything that was involved with that. He didn't have the energy. He didn't have the enthusiasm. He didn't have the inclination to go and do that last year. And you're seeing him like crash for putbacks. You're seeing him, along with Jalen Brunson, leak out on almost every play and take on like an almost Obi Toppin type role, leaking out down the court and being an outlet, something we saw in preseason last year and then basically never saw again from him. It just feels like he has a very different attitude, and more so even than like any skill set adjustment, he's been empowered. And beyond that, and this is something I know you'll love to talk about, in the minutes we got with Deuce with the starters, we saw him bring the ball up, or he got it off a dribble handoff and just like straight up go by Kelly Oubre for a layup. I can't remember one time last season where he brought the ball up and just immediately blew by his defender by a layup. And that's partially like his interest in being aggressive, and that's partially just having like a fully spaced floor.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I notice a lot of the same things. And I think Mikal Bridges and I don't want to make this like a Tom Thibodeau conversation at all, but
Sure.
I do feel like Mikal Bridges was one of the worst utilized players.
Hey, we're talking about the whistleblower right here, right? He was open. He was open about it.
And there's a reason for it, because he recognized what was going on within himself. Like you said, you made such a great point about kind of using his energy, his conditioning, his cardio, his stamina, just deploying it in the wrong ways. Like he shouldn't have to just run through screens and fight over screens and just jog up and down the court. That's not how you use a guy who has his kind of durability and cardio and stamina. You deploy that in the way that is in quick, short burst, where he can use that energy and be able to either attack both on offense and defense, where he could attack and look to create havoc and create steals, be a backline defender, get to the rim, make quick decisions, sprint up the court in transition, leak out and be able to finish plays. Like those are the ways that you want to utilize someone's skill set that is unique for Mikal Bridges in terms of his durability, cardio, all of those things. That's the way you want to use it, not just running around and really not having an impact. And I think Bridges recognized that in himself, recognized that he wasn't performing to his capabilities, but also recognizes that he wasn't being deployed in a way that was consistent with him being able to perform to his own capabilities. And I mean, I don't know if it's a matter of having conversations with Mike Brown just intuitively kind of looking at that player and being like, I know how to use that guy. I know how to make that guy the guy that we've seen in Phoenix, the guy that the Knicks were hoping to bring here, and a guy who, for what the Knicks signed him for, if he plays at that level, that contract will look like a bargain more than it'll look like something that they just had to do because of what they gave up to get him. And so I that's hugely encouraging, has to be so if you're a Knicks fan. And if we get this Mikal Bridges along with some other players that I think can definitely be deployed in ways that really push up what their ceiling can look like, and not just for themselves, but for the impact, the greater good of the team, the sky's really the limit for this team.
We're going to talk about some more of those guys, because I want to talk Karl-Anthony Towns with you, because I know you're a big fan. We'll get into that in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks. But first, I want to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you unlock $300. I need to say it that way because it's a crazy number in bonus bets to use across the app. So here's what I love about FanDuel more than anything else. I am a New York Giants fan. Actually, I didn't ask you your affiliation before the show, but I'm curious to find out when you talk about FanDuel next. It has been a long 13 years since the last Super Bowl. They've not really had a competent quarterback. Maybe that's Jackson Dart. They've not really had an offensive line worthy of protecting him. And lo and behold, everything finally kind of seems to be coming together, and Malik Neighbors tears his ACL. If you are like me and you are in football hell, FanDuel is an incredibly fun way to just add a little bit more juice to your weekend. So whether you're a casual fan or love diving into stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience just that much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. All right, guys, we are back to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. Likely going to be a two-parter because we just have a million different things to hit on. But I kind of like taking a player approach to how we're going to go through this. What have you seen from Karl-Anthony Towns so far? Because my single biggest, and we talked about this when you came on the other week, I thought the single biggest drawback to starting Mitchell Robinson is like, okay, how do you make sure Cat is still a featured part of this offense? And we talk about maximizing these guys' skill sets, putting them in position to succeed. And when Tom Thibodeau, based on Josh Hart's suggestion, made that change in Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals, it was very apparent, understandably, like there was not really a game plan for doing that, because Tom Thibodeau never, I don't think, expected to make that adjustment, never expected to have to start Cat and Mitchell Robinson together in the playoffs. And in turn, like, it was a lot of Cat hovering on the wing, not really doing anything. When you were on last time, I called him a rich man's Anthony Tolliver. I'll stick by that, because that was how, that's not an indictment of Cat. That is an indictment on how he was used. He was treated that way, which is not, if we want to talk money again, how you treat like a guy who, I mean, what's his extension number? It opens up with like $70 million a year. That is not how you treat a guy who's going to be one of the highest paid players in the NBA. And more importantly, I think we'd agree, is probably one of like the 10 to 12 most offensively skilled players, not bigs, just players in the NBA relative to their size. An elite shooter, really good handle. I don't need to tell you guys, there's just an immense amount that he can do as a shot maker and even as a creator on the offensive end of the floor. How have you felt about how Mike Brown has taken advantage of that? You could talk about when he's at the 5-2, but particularly in the alignments where Mitchell Robinson's out there at center.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's done some good things. I do want to say something like, it's really interesting because I'm in full agreement with you, and I personally, and people who've ever heard me talk about Karl-Anthony Towns, A, know how much I love Karl-Anthony Towns as a basketball player, B, know how much I love Karl-Anthony Towns as a 5, as a center, as being a 5 and a 5-out offense. And so it's not my ideal situation for him to start next to Mitchell Robinson. I do think, I honestly am more curious to hear your perspectives on how Mike Brown has been able to try to still, feature Karl-Anthony Towns in these situations where he's not playing the 5 and he's playing next to a true 5 and being more of a wing and being guarded by wings. I think it's really interesting that during the playoffs, Karl-Anthony Towns actually scored a higher points per possession with Mitchell Robinson on the court. Had way more rebounds when Mitchell Robinson was on the court, had more free throw attempts when Mitchell Robinson was on the court, and shot a higher percentage at the rim when Mitchell Robinson was on the court. So that's all really interesting. It's obviously a small sample size, and during the regular season it was similar, but an even tinier sample size. But I just really, really don't know that there's so much you can do to get the most out of Karl-Anthony Towns as an offensive player when he's next to a 5. We saw him play next to Rudy Gobert. He had a really strong season and a couple of seasons in that role. But it's just not the impact that the peak Karl-Anthony Towns impact as a 5, spacing the court, being guarded by centers in a situation where, you know, he was able to be guarded by wings because of he sharing the court with Josh Hart, and defenses were able to figure out how to construct a defense that was really fine-tuned to stop and slow down Karl-Anthony Towns. And to me, I think that's actually the reason for those numbers that I just mentioned, where Karl-Anthony Towns is suddenly having better output with Mitch Robinson on the court with him. And it's like, but I thought you said he's better as a 5. And it's like, well, remember, Josh Hart is the token 5 when we're talking about defensives matching up with the Knicks. And so you'd rather have Mitchell Robinson as your 5 in terms of gravity, vertical gravity, being able to create gravity with his offensive rebounding prowess than you would Josh Hart. Now, when we're talking about Cat at the 5 with a guy like Deuce McBride on the court with him and the rest of the starters, that is where we'll see a completely unstoppable version of Karl-Anthony Towns. The nice thing for me is that I think that we are going to see that a ton, even if the starting lineup is what I'm expecting it to be, what you and I talked about it would likely be a couple weeks ago when I was on, and with Mitchell Robinson potentially being the 5th starter for the Knicks, because Mitchell Robinson's not going to play more than 25 minutes per game. I think he's may not close a lot of games. I think we'll see Karl-Anthony Towns at the 5 close games. And I do trust in Mike Brown to kind of play it by ear and go with the things that are working in whatever specific games based on how defenses are being deployed against them. So I'm really excited about being able to still have that defense play really well, supplementing and supporting Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns with 3 defensive-minded players around them. And when the time comes where the Knicks need to score, that's when you deploy Karl-Anthony Towns at the 5 and see his greatest possible impact at the peak and prime of his career, which I believe he's in. And so I think you allow that give and take, but there are some things that Brown can do to still enhance and get the most out of Towns next to Robinson. So I'm curious about your opinions on what you've seen in that standpoint.
Yeah, it doesn't look comfortable for him playing the 4 still in some ways. And that's despite the fact that, like, he obviously spent, I think, 2 full seasons in Minnesota, mostly playing the 4, like, still looks a little awkward. Like, and I think my appreciation right now where I'm at, and again, this is the honeymoon phase with Mike Brown. Like, I'm sure 10 games in, I'll be, maybe both of us will be ripping a new one over something or another, especially if Deuce is not playing enough. But that's neither here nor there. Like, I'm excited that he's just like experimenting and testing stuff and saying, all right, like, what does Cat look like off a dribble handoff? Very first possession of the second game was Cat getting the ball in the wing, facing up against Dominic Barlow, taking a couple dribbles, shaking him off, and hitting a mid-range jumper. Like, Cat is not Julius Randle. Like, I don't think he's ever going to be like incredibly comfortable or effective attacking wings off the dribble. And to your point, some of the issues last year with that specifically were less so that, oh, the wing locks him down and Cat like can't get into the post and bully him, and more so that there was a center waiting for him at the rim. And it'll be interesting to see how much of that, and maybe this is on me to like go back and watch the film and from the first 2 games, and something I'll have to watch in game 3, and something we'll have to watch far more so in the regular season, where I keep coming back to this point, like where teams will actually be game planning for the Knicks and game planning for ways to make this as painful on Karl-Anthony Towns as possible. But I think both of our gut instincts is Mitchell Robinson will actually have maybe a little bit more gravity than Josh Hart will. And obviously Mike Brown is trying to plan for that a little bit, right, by using Mitch as a dribble handoff hub and using him in some blind pig actions, which is something I pitched last offseason and was like using Mitch in more of a Hartenstein-y role, and it was not something Tom Thibodeau embraced. And it's something like there are going to be growing pains there because Mitch is not very skilled with the ball and it's not intuitive for him like it is for Hartenstein, like it is to a slightly lesser extent for Cat. But there are ways to give Mitch gravity away from the rim, and in turn, like create a true one-on-one opportunity for Cat to attack a wing. And even and it looked awkward last year again because that center was at the rim. If you have an open paint and Cat is attacking a wing, like that should be barbecue chicken. Like Cat should be able to bully his way through him, get all the way to the basket. And I'm curious to see Cat's willingness to do that and not settle for jumpers because he's very comfortable in speed-based attacks on opposing bigs. And we saw so many times last year, right, where he, against my wishes, but would like cascade to the floor and either be like an incredible layup or transition going the other way. And because he's such a good finisher, he was able to make that work. And he was really effective going off the dribble at bigs and in 5-out alignments. And we'll talk about this in the part 2 of this episode. Like we'll see a lot of that. And he will, to your point, probably be unstoppable doing that. But I am fascinated to see how he continues to develop against wings. And I do think like we're going to see just a variety of ways that Mike Brown does that. And that is, again, dribble handoffs. That is him just facing up. That is him like running like big pick and rolls with Mitchell Robinson, which I think we got 1-2-man action between them where Cat slipped Mitch a nice pass, but it was just a little too hot and Mitch bobbled it. That's my big concern there is just, does Mitch, even compared to someone like Rudy Gobert, does he have good enough hands to make that work? And then the other big thing is just, is Cat capable of driving and kicking? And the answer to that last season was mostly no. And that's where other teams were really, really effective in doubling. I do think, again, like Mitch having some gravity will make that easier because you'll see two bigs a little bit less. And Cat had this play where Mitch's big did come over. And if he had just like curled it around the guy, Mitch would have had a dunk. But instead, he made a really nice pass along the baseline to the opposite corner, got Pacome Dadier in game 1, just a wide open 3. And that's exciting that Cat is making that pass and presumably spent a decent chunk of the offseason working on that specific pass. So I do think there's a lot of fun stuff and actionable stuff for Mike Brown to implement around Karl-Anthony Towns. The question just is like, what is his comfort level and what is the trade-off that you get with Mitch's defense on the floor, Mitch's rebounding and Mitch's at the rim gravity versus going 5-out and actually unlocking the best version of Karl-Anthony Towns. But actually, I want to get into that next time on Locked On Knicks. But first, I want to say one more time, thank you so much for joining me, buddy. This has been a blast doing our first show together.
Same here, man. I'm so excited, genuinely so excited. I think we're putting together a superstar squad, and it's going to be an amazing season for the Knicks, an amazing season for Locked On Knicks. So hopefully everybody here, if you're still listening, again, you're subscribed up and are going to be with us throughout the season every single day, which is sick.
and this is just the beginning. A lot of new stuff coming, a lot of fun guests, but I'm really excited with where we're at. And we'll talk to you next time again with XJ here on Locked On Knicks.